and welcome to 6 Degrees of Boston, the power of business networks. I'm John Bernstein, Regional President of PNC Bank here in New England, and I'm pleased to be joined on stage by some of the great leaders of the business networks here in our community. People I've got a chance to know and work with and admire and respect. Furthest away is Brooke Thompson, who's CEO of AIM. We have Colette Phillips, who's CEO of Colette Phillips Communications, and J.D. Chesloff, who's the CEO of the Massachusetts Business Roundtable. Welcome and good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
I want to start with an opening question so our audience knows and is aware. Please, could you tell us briefly about your organization and its mission? And J.D. will start on this side.
Sure. So good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Boston Globe and to PNC for hosting this session, sponsoring the session. So my name is J.D. Chesloff. I'm the president and CEO of an organization called Massachusetts Business Roundtable, as John mentioned. We're a group of about 95 CEOs, senior executives from large employers across the state, working on state public policy in pursuit of the mission to make Massachusetts a better place to do business. We hear from members a lot about doing business here, what's good about that, what's challenging about that, and then work with public policymakers to try to make this an attractive place to recruit, retain, develop, and diversify talent streams. When we talk to our members about why they're members of the Roundtable, one of the key elements is business development, networking, relationship building, and so I'm really excited to be part of this conversation.
Colette.
Colette Phillips Communications. I am the CEO and founder, 3 decades, I can't believe that. And we are a strategic public relations and marketing company that is focused on mission-driven work and impact work. And our differentiator is that we help our clients build brands in markets that they have not either considered or have not been part of their marketing mix, which includes women, people of color, and immigrants. And I am also the founder of an organization called Get Connected, with a K. And Get Connected was created really to be a cross-cultural business and social networking event series so that it can help to break barriers down, get people to really know each other. Because at the end of the day, people do business, people help people that they know, people they like, and people they trust. And the only way that's going to happen, it's not on LinkedIn, it's not on Facebook, it's not on X, it's going to be face-to-face interaction. And if there is anything that we learned from the pandemic, is how important connectivity is. And so I am delighted to be on this panel, and I applaud the Globe and PNC for this panel, 6 degrees, because in Boston, it's really more like 1 degree.
Well, good morning. I'm Brooke Thompson. I am president of Associated Industries of Massachusetts, more affectionately known as AIM. I just want to thank John and PNC and the Boston Globe for having me and my esteemed panelists, whom I'm lucky enough to get to work with regularly. So for those of you who don't know what AIM is, we are a statewide business trade association. We've been around for 108 years, and we represent businesses across the Commonwealth, from the Berkshires to Boston. We have about 3,400 members, and we represent 150 different industries. AIM was originally started 108 years ago to represent manufacturers who were key to our economic security. But we've evolved over time, and we continue to evolve. And as JD and Colette said, you know, the value that we provide is really an opportunity for folks in the business community to connect. We do that through events, both virtual and in person, like today. We also do that through bringing in key policymakers to talk to folks. And then we try to connect businesses, which is so vital. And all of those things really bring together that collaboration.
Brooke, would you go on and talk a little bit about the mission and how you use the power of the collaboration and your members in the network to advance the mission of AIM?
I'd love to. Really, the mission at AIM is to demonstrate how business can be a force for positive change, right? And we view ourselves at AIM as a connector. We certainly are not outrunning businesses that our members are running every day. We're certainly not out there enacting policy that our policymakers are doing every day, but we have that ability to bring those folks together, right? And that's what's key. We really try to provide education. Again, businesses, people out in your jobs every day, you're out working, right? You're out taking care of your families. So what we can do to add value is keep you updated on what's going on that affects you day to day. And bring folks together so that you can share best practices. One thing at AIM that's been really core to this mission of being a force for good and change in business is finding opportunities to provide resources to help businesses do better, right? We in the Commonwealth believe strongly, to follow up on the last panel, that Massachusetts is a great place to have a business and to live and raise a family. And so what we're here to do is to provide those resources, whether that's to try to connect folks so that they can find new purchasers or more suppliers, whether that's to help you grow your networks so you have more potential folks in your business stream. All of those things, along with, again, just connecting and sharing best practices, is really how we try to provide value.
Colette, what would you add to that, what Brooke just said?
Yeah, I would say that certainly collaboration is really critical in this environment because no one organization or one group can really meet all the needs. And I'll give you an example of good collaboration. When the decision came down from the Supreme Court with affirmative action, I reached out to Brooke, I reached out to Amplify Latinx, to BECMA, to Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and a competitor of BUR, so I wouldn't name it, about convening a conversation around how is the business community going to address this issue. And I have to say it was really a very powerful and impactful conversation that we ended up having about 100 people in the room like today and 10,000 people tuned in to YouTube. And so I think that to me is really about communication, collaboration, and connection.
Yeah, it's just to build on that. For me, it really is all about building partnerships and intentionally building partnerships, as both Brooke and Colette have said, right? And so it's very different to go up to someone and say, hey, we should work together, as opposed to here's an idea for how we can. It's almost like if you don't really want to have lunch with someone, you're like, hey, we should get lunch sometime. But if you do want to have lunch with someone, you're like, what are you doing Thursday at noon, right? It's sort of that same idea.
Absolutely.
And so I just to give an example, it's something that we actually are working on together around early childhood education, right? So this is an issue that we have heard quite a bit from the employer community as a priority. Brooke and AIM have a terrific initiative called the Pink Slip Initiative, which I'm sure she'll talk about, which is about getting folks back connected to the workforce. We realized a few years ago that the business community really has a powerful voice to play in early childhood advocacy. John and PNC have been real leaders in this space. John co-chairs something that spun out of the roundtable called the Business Coalition for Early Childhood Education. It is 85 now
members.
Businesses that have come together with 20 business associations, including AIM, to do a variety of things around advocating for public policy, around funding research, around sharing best practices, right? This is a way for us to intentionally come together in partnership to move an agenda that helps the mission of our organizations, and frankly, to your point about the previous panel, really helps the entire Commonwealth. And so it's something that I believe in very, very strongly as the head of the roundtable, to very intentionally seek out partnerships and collaborations to help move an agenda, because it's much more powerful than trying to do it alone.
Yeah, it's been a fun partnership with the coalition. There's over 300,000 employees we represent in the state, part of the coalition, to advocate to make Massachusetts a more compelling place to help raise a family. As Secretary Howe talked about, we're losing an enormous number of people here, unfortunately too many, out of the state who are leaving early. Switch for a second on a personal basis. Can you share an example how you leveraged your network, either professional or organizations, to lever up your own success?
I'm happy to go
wanna
first.
start?
So, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, John. You know, I've said that how I got here running AIM is kind of an anomaly to me if I look back. I really feel like I'm a story of how just being engaged and being out there and having relationships and having conversations can lead you on the path of where you want to go. I certainly did not, you know, when I was growing up in the Midwest and I decided to come out here to Massachusetts to go to college, I didn't say, I'm going to run a business trade association someday. That was not, you know, sort of in my thought stream. But what I was able to do was, again, find things of interest to me, right? Find folks for whom I maybe had some common values and try to connect with them. Do internships. I will say for me, had I not had a fabulous opportunity through Northeastern University to do a co-op, I would not have ended up working in the State House and maybe wouldn't have gone on the track that I did. But so I really do feel like the importance there is putting yourself out there. There is a little bit of risk you have to take, right? And I think particularly for us females, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that we sometimes have that, oh, I can't put myself out there. I can't go for that. I can't connect with that person who's maybe, you know, senior management. You can do it. You know, believe in yourself. Put yourself out there because connecting and having those relationships then sets you sort of on this course of, oh, look at this opportunity that I wouldn't have even thought of, but it came my way through that connection.
I would say that the way I have leveraged network and to level up, I observed that in Boston, as the city was becoming more culturally diverse, I would look at these lists that different publications would put together and recognize that on those lists, what was missing were the people that I know, very high achievers who were of diverse cultural backgrounds, and they were nowhere on those lists. So rather than complain about it, I decided to create a list, the historic list in 2016 was the first of the 100 most influential people of color in Boston who are contributing to the economic, social, and civic fabric of our city and our Commonwealth. And from that, I started doing a series of lists across sectors and industries to really amplify, elevate, and showcase so that the media, the corporate community, and nonprofits will just stop saying, we can't find any. So that has become my network. You know that there is a commercial that says, this is my network. The databases that I have built have become my network. And in doing so, I have really kind of become the go-to person that the media calls, that CEOs call when they're looking for something that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
You followed something that you saw was a missing category and
Exactly.
pursued it. Colette, it's been an amazing group you pulled together. It really is.
Yeah,
JD?
game changing. I mean, your work has been really influential.
Thank you.
So a couple of thoughts. One, just to pick up on you know, you never thought you'd run a business association. My grandparents were actually practicing communists in Poland, and I am a business lobbyist. So that was not
We're live, JD, just so you remember that? Yeah.
that was not on the plan. So as I think about this question, so for me, it's a little bit about what you're saying, right? It's being a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
And one of my guiding principles around networking is just get out of your lane, right? Like I understand that I am a privileged white male. I run an organization of CEO types. And it's been very important to me to make sure organizationally and personally that I get out of that lane, right? And so I'll give you an example of what that looks like. There's an organization in town called Conexion. It's a professional development organization for mid-career Latina and Latino professionals. We've done some programming with them. It's a mentor model, so I'm actually a mentor in that program. And I have had now 5 successive years of mentees. So on a personal level, that has gotten me out of my network lane. Comfort zone. To the point where, Colette, I will walk into a room and it's a bunch of people speaking a language that I don't know, right? And so that's not a feeling I'm used to. It's certainly a feeling they're used to. And it's important for me to have that as a personal experience. as I think about building networks. Organizationally, we have convened members of the roundtable with folks in this cohort to come together and share experiences and get to know one another. I'll give you a great example. We had a group of about a dozen or so Connexion folks go up to iRobot. The CEO of iRobot was a member of the roundtable, and he gave a tour of iRobot, talked about his starts at MIT and how he built that company, talked about internship opportunities at iRobot for folks who were in the room or their children. And it was really powerful. And it's just, for me, it's about, we have all these networks in town. And how do we connect those networks?
Exactly.
Right? How do you intersect those networks? And it needs to be intentional. And that's something we're pretty committed to, and I'm committed to personally at the roundtable.
Yeah. A question came in from the online viewers.
Was it about the communist thing?
No, that one they blocked, I think, so far. So that's
This is
good.
a 7-second delay.
But it's interesting, following up Secretary Howe and talking about what we're all working to make Massachusetts and the city of Boston a more lovable and livable place. The question came in is, how do we compare to other states when it comes to business networking? Are there examples of things that we can and should do better?
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. I think we have an advantage, and I think to pivot off what Colette said at the outset, I really think it's more like 1 or 2 degrees here in Boston and in Massachusetts, and that's a real advantage. And I say that because, again, if you put yourself out there, right, and you start getting uncomfortable, you will find that even though we're a big city, we're kind of a small town at the same time. Now, it's not going to come to you, and I say this all the time again, putting my female executive hat on. I think particularly for women, we, and as humans generally, we flock towards people who are like us, right? You got to do what JD said. You got to step outside your comfort zone. But I do think we have a real advantage here in Massachusetts. I also think the fact that COVID did happen and the fact that we have technology like this, where we can have this fabulous crowd, but we also have all these folks watching from their desks or from their homes, right? Let's use that technology in the networking space, right? Colette's right. We got to be together. You got to see people. But particularly for women, traditionally a lot of traditional networking opportunities happen in the morning, right, at breakfast. They happen right after work. They might happen on the weekends. And we know that traditionally women make up a large percentage of our caregivers. And so that can be viewed as an impediment by some folks. What I say is let's use the fact that technology here in Massachusetts is so advanced to find other ways to connect, right? And that's really, I think, going to be an advantage that particularly helps women get out there, get connected, and find those relationships that help.
So again, what are we doing to make our state more competitive here? What can we do to learn and what can we do better?
Well, I think one of the things that we can certainly do better is to engage with CEOs and the business community around how do we keep young people here in Massachusetts. We have 250,000 new students who come to Boston, Greater Boston, Massachusetts each year. And at the end of their 4-year, they all kind of go away. And here we are, the epicenter of technology, innovation, life sciences, and we should be able to keep these students here. And I know that Secretary Howe, who was on, is really working diligently with people like AIM and JD at the Business Roundtable and other CEOs and leaders about how do we work together. Maybe it is giving housing stipend to young people so that they can stay, and how do we not lose companies to Florida, to Texas, to New Hampshire, but we get to keep them here because we have incentivized them with a way to stay in our state.
Yeah, I was on a panel this morning before this one, and with Secretary Jones and a couple of employers, MITRE Corporation, a pharmaceutical company, and this was the topic. And they were talking about specifically about young talent, how difficult it is to keep it. I know Secretary Howe is working on an economic development plan for the state that Brooke and I are helping with. And this comes up all the time, right? And you come back to the issues around housing and infrastructure and cost of living. As I look around the country, so I convene a group of about 30 other business roundtables from other states around the country. And it is interesting to see the difference in the environment in these states for networking. Secretary Howe always talks about how we are a welcoming community, and that we welcome a whole variety of people in. And I do think that when we sit down and think about building our partnerships and networks here, it's just different. And I think about our work, and we can quibble about the outcome of the paid family medical leave experience, right? Mm-hmm. But there was a paid family medical leave law going through a process, and at the table were Brooke and I and a couple of other folks from the business community, and folks from the labor community, and folks from the advocate community, sitting down together trying to figure this out, right? And I remember bringing that example to colleagues around the country, and like, why are you doing that? Why would you? And it's just it's a different ecosystem here, right? I mean, you experience it too.
Absolutely. And I think that's really key. As somebody who I wasn't from here, I came here to college, right? I'm that story. And then I stayed. What made me stay? I think it's back to what are the values that we have here in Massachusetts that our young people like and are attracted to? What's that connectivity they have, as JD said, right? To networks, so that when college is over, they're not, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. It's all of those things combined. But again, I do think that's where we particularly, and I'm going to put myself in this category of somebody who's an older executive, it's important that I take a leadership role in this and provide opportunities to those folks on my team who are younger to say, okay, this is hard, so I'm going to present you with opportunities to network, right? I'm going to look for conferences, and I'm going to suggest maybe you go to that, right? I do think there's an obligation, and again, particularly for women, be that mentor, right, that JD's talking about. Go out, find somebody, and help them, because this stuff isn't natural, and I'm sure all of us can say we look back on it now and it seems really easy, right? But it's not, and it's certainly not when you're young, and so I do think helping it really foster those opportunities will make it easier to attract those folks.
Well, if I could just add, from the lenses of people of color, has not always been welcoming to young professionals of color, and that's why we have not been able until now to really retain people of color. That's why I started Get Connected, because there was a need for people to get to know each other cross-culturally and intergenerationally. And I am a strong believer that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And so people have to sometimes step out of their comfort zone and get to meet people who look different from you, who may speak a different language. And I commend JD for your partnership with Conexion, because, again, if I can just give a plug to my book that's coming out in January called The Includers, The 7 Traits of Culturally Savvy Anti-Racist Leaders. And what that book is about, it's about white male leadership stepping into their power and privilege and saying, I want to make a difference. I want to engage with a broad cross-section of people, whether it's mentoring young professionals within my business of color, whether it's creating opportunities for them to be able to grow in their career, that to change the dynamics and to create the kind of networking that's going to help people move up the ladder, you have to really be intentional, as JD says, and deliberate. That's how networking is. And beyond just networking is not just about, going to a lot of activities. It's about connection. Yeah. So you could go to an event and you meet a lot of people, but you haven't made the strategic right connection that might lead you to your next job. 80% of the jobs that are available are never advertised. They come from people you know and a referral.
So Colette, I love your line. I love that quote. I also love, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, right? The end of your comfort zone or the edge of it. You can debate which one it is.
Right.
But we had an interesting question come across the online viewers, and also that's a question that's very similar to what I wanted to ask, which is, networking is such a personal activity. But given how the world of work has changed and the hybrid piece we're in today, what is your advice to all ages and about how do you use the power of networks? How do you continue to promote networking? And what does AI do to imply that networking and the component in the business community?
So, my second lesson around networking is very simple: show up.
Yes.
Show up. And you alluded to it before, particularly now, with this remote environment and folks working at home. Showing up is doubly important. I think it's always been important.
Yes.
But it's doubly important now. I showed up at your thing Monday night. You had an unbelievable event Monday night, which was terrific. It was a networking event. You learned. You see people you don't normally see. Show up is the key. Brooke had an event. I forget if it was this week or last week, with the secretary and a few others. And we were talking about this connection. Just to go back to this other point for a second, and talking about this connection between building these networks, building diverse networks, and the state's competitiveness. And I thought it was there's a direct line.
Yes.
Right? As we as business leaders think about the competitiveness of the state, and our organizations focused our missions on the competitiveness of the state, this diversity pipeline thing is not mutually exclusive. There's actually a direct line, and the secretary talked about that. And I think it's important as we think about the motivations for networking and for building these coalitions, right?
Yes.
There's a variety of them, some of them personal, but some of them are about where we're heading as a state, both value-wise and competitively.
I'm also going to say, I'm a big advocate. Absolutely, you have to show up. But you also have to toot your own horn. So use technology. Get on LinkedIn. Have a profile. Engage in your profile. Again, don't let that imposter syndrome creep in. If you've gone somewhere, take pictures. Take pictures that you were here today. Go up and meet 3 people that you wouldn't have walked up to, right? Don't just find the people who you recognize. Talk to them, and then tell everybody else in your social media universe where you were. I think we can use that to stay connected. It's going to have to be in unison with showing up and doing things in person. And I certainly know, as the mother of a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old who are afraid to go up in the Chipotle line and order their own burrito bowls, that it's sometimes hard to talk to people you don't know. But the more you do it, you will develop that muscle memory. But again, it's be your best salesman, right? Tell people where you are, and they're going to want to go, and they're going to see you out there and say, wow, look at her, look at him. He's doing a lot of great stuff. I need to get to know him.
It's one thing that John Chesto talked about this morning is the power of LinkedIn and looking at stories on LinkedIn and understanding how that communication goes on LinkedIn. So it was a really interesting
Well,
piece.
I will say that AI will never replace the intellectual property and the intellectual agency of the human spirit and human beings. So I think of AI like I think of social media. I say to my young professionals and mentees, you all want to work remotely, but you're not going to hear about that opportunity at your job that you may want to apply for. And it's, out of sight, out of mind. There is a reason why MIA means missing in action. Even though you're doing great work, who knows, except your boss? You're not in the office. So yes, remote might be good, but you have to also show up.
Just to pick up on the AI thing real quick, John. I do individual interviews with roundtable members every summer and just ask them what's going on in their company, in their industry, in the economy. And I've been doing this for 13 years. Prior to this year, no one mentioned AI. This year, everyone mentioned AI. It was fascinating. And the takeaway for me was I heard AI is going to replace jobs. It's also going to create jobs. It's also going to enhance existing jobs. And that hasn't all settled out yet, right? But the biggest issue that came up, to your point, Colette, is the biggest fear is the fear of error in using AI. Mm-hmm. And because the information that it's drawing from could be wrong.
That's right.
And so there'll always be it'll always be necessary to have a human checking it.
That's right.
And that's what came up quite a bit as we were having these conversations, that AI is only as good as the data that it's incorporate.
Accessible to,
Right.
yes.
So we have 5 minutes left, and I have 2 questions I want to get through. So we're going to try to get through these quickly. One question came in offline, which I think is a great one, which is we've all mentioned the importance of internship opportunities to keep young people here. Any ideas on how to increase the number of diversity of internship offerings here in the state?
So I'm going to say this, it starts with employers, it starts with executives stepping up and saying, even though it's extra work, even though it takes time, finding those opportunities, putting them out there, and then I'm going to do a little bit more pushing, because that's what I do, because I'm kind of a nudge. Pay for those internships, particularly when we're talking about making them available to everyone and increasing the diverse population that is going to apply for those internships. You need to pay folks. We know it costs a lot to live. We know it costs a lot to travel to work, right? So you need to provide those opportunities. And the return on investment for employers is fantastic. You get to know people out there in the pipeline. You don't have to go out and do recruiting. You've now brought in folks. You've done some on-the-job training. You know what they're like personality-wise, right? You're not just looking at a resume that's giving you information, but you don't understand the personal nuances of it. So there's benefits across the board for both potential employees and for employers, but it's going to take action and intentional action in order to really bring about that change.
I really agree with you. I pay my interns. I think you have to walk the talk and recognize that the days of unpaid internship, like when I was in college, I worked as an intern, unpaid, but I also got a tremendous amount of experience. Mm-hmm. And there are some universities and institutions of higher ed where an internship comes with a grade. You get to grade the students. And at the end of it, for the students who are working for credit, I always give them a stipend, because I think it's a way to say thank you for being here. You didn't have to choose my company, but you did, and I want to show my appreciation. So I think it's important to pay your interns.
Yeah, and then you expand that out, and then you have an apprenticeship model, right, where you're paying folks, and there's a job at the end. The trades have used this to great success. Greater Boston Chamber and Accenture are doing some great work on this in the private sector as well. But it's exactly what you're talking about. But that model, the apprenticeship model, has been a terrific one that's shown some success.
I'd like to finish with one question, and you all are involved and engaged in trying to promote and build the Commonwealth and the region here to be the best place possible. And I want to go to Colette to start with, because today is her birthday, and so I think it's appropriate to ask.
Thank you.
What's a wish you have for the future of Boston?
Wow. That Boston will become the leader and the city on a hill, if you will, for really showing how people of different cultural backgrounds, people in different industries, can come together to really create and to make our city and our state a better place for everyone, where everyone has not only a seat at the table, but a voice.
Ditto. No lanes, or one lane, right? Get out of your lane, and there's one lane that everyone is traveling in toward the vision that you're talking about. Absolutely agree with you, Colette.
Yeah, and as a mother, again, of 2 girls, that they will stay here, that all of the fabulous folks, as we sit here in front of a fantastic university, stay here, raise a family here, grow a business here, and really, become the fabric of what Massachusetts is. And, that quite frankly, folks like Secretary Howe we're fighting people off with a stick instead of saying, come here, stay here, grow here.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your perspectives and your opinions and your wishes for the future of our community. Thank the Globe. Glad to be here today. Good to see Secretary Howe. Thank you for your comments, and Mr. Chesto in the back over there. It's a great day to be here. Thank you all.